Hello and welcome to History's Cheat Sheet. Here we learn about history with bite-sized videos. Today we'll take a closer look at the common ancestor of humans and chimpanzees. Well, from our point of view, they still look more like monkeys, of course. They lived mainly in trees and on the ground, moving on all fours. They couldn't make tools or talk, but if we start to move forward in time, this common ancestor branches into two different lines in the family tree. Chimpanzees and bonobos developed from one, and the humans from the other. And the branch from which we come will slowly, over millions of years, become more and more like us. In today's video, we're going to look at three distinct changes in human evolution that set us apart from apes and most other animals. Firstly, how we learned to walk on two legs. Secondly, how we learned to use tools. And thirdly, how we learned to use fire. So, from about 7 million to 4.5 million years ago, a group of ape-like human ancestors lived in Africa. And then suddenly, they started walking on two legs. Oh, they might have thought, hey, I can walk! Yay! Well, alright, they couldn't really talk, but why did they start walking on two legs? There are probably several different reasons. Again, we don't know for sure. One possible explanation is that the area used to be wet and rainy with large forests where monkeys could live in the trees. They had a good time there with fruits, climbing, it was warm but not too hot. But then sometime around 7 to 4.5 million years ago, things changed. Over thousands of years, the place where they lived became very dry, and the forest was replaced by tall grass plains or savannas. Those ancestors who lived there no longer had trees everywhere to hang on to, but had to move more and more on the ground. How do monkeys move on the ground? Well, initially they really moved like this. But what was different about the landscape? Predators. They were already thinking like, nice monkey meat. So what was the problem? Because there was tall grass, you couldn't see the predators. So what did they do? They stood up on two legs. This allowed them to see further and to find out how far the danger was and if it was necessary to skedaddle. Over time, this change took place and our ancestors, who until then had lived mainly in trees, started to walk on two legs, like us. And after many generations, their bodies adapted accordingly, and thus they become different from other great apes. In other words, this was the first very important change on the way from an ape-like ancestor to human. Alright, now we essentially have walking monkeys. But they're not quite humans, right? What do you think happened next? Well, one thing that sets us apart from other animals is the use of tools. Indeed, other animals also use tools. For example, chimpanzees forage for insects from various cavities. But unlike humans, they make tools very rarely. Mostly just using a good stick. And they do not keep tools for constant use, nor improve their quality over time. Millions of years passed and they still use some random stick from a nearby bush. They cannot invent anything new. But now, about 3 to 2.5 million years ago, our ancestors started making real stone tools. What happened when they stood up on two legs? Their hands were suddenly free. They could make tools with their hands, and since these tools were made of stone, this marks the beginning of a period in world history called the Stone Age. But why did they make stone tools? Well, firstly, rocks are almost everywhere, and many rocks, when struck against each other, will split and become sharp, and you can use them to, cut meat, for example. Secondly, they probably also made tools from wood and bone and many other materials, but they have decayed by now because it was all so long ago. Thirdly, metals could not be used yet because, for that one had to know how to heat ore. So, at first, these stone tools were very rudimentary. This here is called a hand axe. It was held by the blunt end and with the sharp end pointed toward the target. They were relatively basic tools, not quite the chef's knife. Even a cheap knife bought from a local store got better. In other words, 2.5 million years ago, there were already walking human ancestors with tools. What and how do you think they ate? Well, like us, they ate many different things. Berries, fruits, probably some roots, maybe even insects. But now something that monkeys generally don't do, they also ate meat. But where did they get that meat? They were not yet engaged in hunting because, back then they only had hand axes. Try hunting an animal with that. So initially they were scavengers. These human ancestors at that time were not very big or strong animals, and if they were separated from the herd, there was a fairly high probability that some lion would simply eat them. But they were smart and lived together in groups, essentially herds, and together they were strong. For example, when a lion had feasted on a zebra or a gazelle, they either waited until the lion went away and nibbled on the leftovers, or if they were particularly brave, they simply drove the lion away by acting as a group, making a lot of noise. And then the lion was like, can't even eat in peace. In other words, in the beginning, human ancestors did not hunt, but they were like hyenas. They were carrion eaters. But why was eating meat important? Well, you get a lot of energy from meat, and the human is a special animal. We have a very big brain, especially compared to our overall weight. And the brain is an organ that takes a lot of energy. It's like a smartphone that runs out of battery quickly because all the screens and data connection and other features that take an awful lot of power, you have to charge it all the time. And now, over the course of human evolution, over millions of years, we see how the brain grows and grows, with species of humans emerging with larger and larger brain sizes. The brain of modern humans is more than 3 times larger than that of apes. The fact that we started eating meat and at the same time that we started using tools helped a lot, because tools developed us much like toys develop little children. And then came another factor that developed the human brain. Fire! How did this happen? Well, let's talk more about meat. Which meat do you prefer, raw or cooked? Oh, you might agree that raw meat is a bit gross. But other animals eat raw meat without the second thought. Again, this is something that sets us apart from other animals. The thing about cooked meat is that it's easier to digest. In other words, the energy saved from digestion in the stomach can be used by the brain, which needs a lot of energy. And because of that, our brains got even bigger. But in order to cook meat, it was necessary to discover fire. Well, because you can't cook meat without fire, right? Duh! Fire was probably discovered when our ancestors noticed that savanna fires left behind tasty burnt gazelle meat. And then they slowly learned to harness that natural fire and keep it from going out. In other words, if you take burning logs and you keep adding more wood and more wood, you will get the fire. And fire is a very cool thing, right? Cool thing, get it? Well, you can sit around it and have a barbecue, and at night it is no longer pitch black, other animals do not dare to attack, and it's warm. When human ancestors learned to use fire is again debated, with opinions ranging from 1.6 million years ago to 200,000 years ago. But what did fire give us? Cooking, light, protection from animals, warmth. Wait, why is heat important? It's always quite warm in Africa, right? Well, but in many other parts of the world, it is not. Well, here in Estonia, for example, you can't run around naked all day in winter. And this means that fire allowed human ancestors to finally migrate out of Africa to other parts of the world. Anyway, over hundreds of thousands of years, humans changed and evolved, and their tools got better and better, and they started hunting themselves instead of scavenging. And now, finally, about 200,000 years ago, modern humans, the same species that we all belong to, evolved. This species of ours is called Homo sapiens in Latin, and the fact that Homo sapiens evolved 200,000 years ago means that a person born 200,000 years ago was already physically exactly the same as us. If they grew up in our world today, we wouldn't be able to tell them apart. They would look exactly the same. And this concludes today's video. Next up on the timeline, we take a look how humans developed language and thought. If you like what we do here, then don't forget to support us by subscribing to the channel and giving the video a thumbs up. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. See you soon.